After the PS1's success that nobody saw coming, it was time for Sony's second act in the console market. But after the PS1 sold over 100 million units worldwide, was it even possible to have a more successful second go at things? Sony would give it their all in an attempt to do just that. So let's take a look back at the launch and the success of the PS2 and see what made it work so well. In 1999, Sony had announced the PS2 was coming. The work had begun shortly after the PS1. Early specs showed that it was something to be excited for as well, as it was shaping up to be the most powerful console on the market, and it would also be a DVD player. This initially would be a little bit scary, as the price of DVD players at this time, if you remember, they were insane. The PS2 was also announced to be fully backwards compatible with the PS1, all its games and accessories, which was a massive plus, as now you could technically sell your old PS1 system and you wouldn't miss out on any of the PS1 games, as the PS1 library was absolutely massive, so that was something you were going to want to hang on to. The console hardware was a big feature, mainly the custom-built Emotion Engine processor that would be co-developed by Toshiba. This would also make it more powerful than most computers that were in homes at the time. This console seemed to be too good to be true, and the hype was massive around it. The console was reported to be 20 times faster than the original PS1. Sony stated that the PS2 would be able to render 7.5 million to 16 million polygons per second. This would be compared to Sega, who could do 3 million to 6 million with the Sega Dreamcast. The early stages of the PS2 would prove to be difficult to program for, but when companies found a way to get it under control, it proved to be well worth it, as games would look absolutely stunning. The PS2 would finally hit store shelves March 4th, 2000 in Japan, and October 26th, 2000 in North America. And this launch was insane. I remember seeing commercials for it and people went nuts for this console. This had to be the most anticipated launch of all time. With the amount of people camping out to get the PS2, I just don't think I've seen that happen with very many consoles afterwards. Yes, people definitely camped out for consoles, but definitely not to this magnitude. The first time I saw the PS2 in person was shortly after launch. I was pretty young, and my sister's boyfriend had actually bought one, and he brought it over to my house and let me play NHL 2001. And my god, my little brain was blown away by how it looked compared to the PS1. Side note, I also loved how early the PS2 games had the blue bottoms of the discs there, as they would have been made on CD-ROMs instead of DVDs. Just a little thing, stupid, but I always thought that was kind of cool. The PS2 would launch with 29 games, most notable being Tekken Tag, Ridge Racer, Smuggler's Run, Time Splitters, one of my personal favorites, and a handful of sports titles. I spent most of my time with it playing Time Splitters and NHL. At the beginning, there wasn't much else to do, so I was happy with just that. The PS2 would be a black 2-layer box with a pop-out disc tray, 2 controller ports, 2 memory card ports, and would have PS2 written on the top of the console in a bluish-blackish tinge. They would also put the colored PlayStation logo on the disc tray, and you could change it to whatever direction you wanted it, depending on which way you were storing your console. With a new console comes a new controller, the new DualShock 2. And well, if it isn't broke, I guess don't fix it. This controller is just like the original DualShock, however, it would have analog buttons, meaning the harder you pressed would impact the gameplay. Like, for instance, with Gran Turismo, the harder you pressed X, the faster your car goes. There would be an analog button in the middle, and it could toggle the sticks from digital mode to analog mode. In digital mode, the sticks functioned just like a D-pad, while in analog, they would provide the input, with however far your stick would pushed over, that's how your character would move. The PS2 sold approximately 600 million units in Japan on its launch day, but only 500 million units in its launch weekend in the States. This was actually caused though by a shortage due to manufacturing issues, and sales would pick up and would have no signs of slowing down whatsoever. This was heavily helped by the fact that the PS2 was a DVD player, as the PS2 was also a cheaper DVD player than any other DVD player on the market, and it was a good DVD player to boot. So families wouldn't just buy the PS2 to play games, they would buy the PS2 to play DVDs and sometimes games. This was a brilliant move by Sony, and really made it just impossible for other companies to play catch up. This would spell disaster for Sega, as not even a year into the PS2's life, Sega would discontinue their Dreamcast as it just could not keep up, and they would then become a software company only from then on. Kinda sad to see the Dreamcast go, but it was inevitable. The PS2 would have absolutely massive exclusive games, which would set them apart from a lot of their competitors. Games like God of War, Shadow of Colossus, Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, Jak, Ratchet & Clank, and the game that I played the most, Final Fantasy X. This was a game that, when I come back to it, I get just as hooked as the first day that I played it. And I have beaten this game well over 20 times. And I'll continue to play it because it's Final Fantasy X. It's the greatest Final Fantasy game ever made. The console would eventually sell over 160 million units worldwide. Almost 60 million more than what the PS1 sold, and this number is still unbeaten, as the PS2, I think, will sit on top of that charts list for years to come. I don't think anybody's beating it. The console would get a new look in 2004 with the PS2 Slim. This would be so much smaller than the original, and it's actually crazy how small. The disc tray would be replaced with a door that pops up open, and the console could also support online play with the adapter that would plug into the back of the fat one, but that was actually built right into the little slim guy. But honestly, I don't actually remember the PS2 online being all that holy crap, it actually had over 1.4 million users. Okay, well, maybe it was more popular than I thought. But still, considering how much it sold, that's still not crazy popular, but it's still a wildly bigger number than I thought it would have been. The PS2 wasn't even discontinued until January 4th, 2013, 13 years later after the launch. The last game to release was PES Soccer 14, which is hilarious to actually see out and about, but I haven't actually seen one in a long time, so I don't know how many copies of it are actually out there. My time with the PS2 is where most of my gaming memories come from. They come from staying up late playing SmackDown or Final Fantasy X with my friend Ryan at sleepovers, or going to my other friend Dan's house in the mornings on weekends to beat Ratchet & Clank. Games we actually beat the first 3 altogether. We would also play NHL on the easiest difficulty, just so we could run the score up on the Toronto Maple Leafs because neither of us liked them and we always wanted to hurt Sundin. It's a time I will look back on with so much happiness, and I'm so glad I got to live through the PS2's life, as it is definitely my favorite console, and I cannot get over how much this console changed my life and affected the gaming world that I was in. And that is a brief look back at the PS2's life, one of the greatest consoles of all time and the top selling console of all time. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you on the next one.